Good morning. It is Sunday, October the 5th. I'm Ali Velshi, and I want to begin this hour with a little time capsule. It's May of 2023. Joe Biden was the president of the United States. Donald Trump was out of power. Trump's in 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the Stormy Daniels hush money cover-up scheme had just been unsealed a month earlier. But Trump and many others in his orbit were already plotting his comeback to the White House. One man in particular was busy drawing up extremely specific plans for a second Trump presidency. That man and his team were literally writing out executive orders and legal memos to justify some of those plans, some of which were based on shaky legal foundations. That man, let's call him Russell, was working up a blueprint for deploying the American military against American protesters, defunding major government agencies, and specifically targeting civil servants as part of a slash-and-burn plan to dismantle the government.
We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. When they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work. Because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want to put them in trauma.
Russell Vought, the architect of Project 2025 and now the director of Donald Trump's Office of Management and Budget. Those remarks you just heard were delivered in May of 2023 at an invite-only annual gathering of his organization called the Center for Renewing America. He was laying out a goal for a second Trump term: to defund and destroy the federal workforce. At the time and throughout his campaign, Donald Trump pretended he didn't know Project 2025 and he had nothing to do with it. Now he openly brags that Vought, he of Project 2025 fame, as Trump called him this week, is deciding who gets fired. The mask is off. And that brings us to the current government shutdown, now on day 5. As of this hour, Washington is technically in a government shutdown, but for practical purposes, the shutdown has been underway for months. America has experienced 21 shutdowns in the past half century. The longest was 34 days. That was during Trump's first administration. But never before have we seen a White House use a shutdown to permanently fire workers rather than temporarily furlough them, impound congressionally appropriated funds, and target states, cities, and projects for partisan punishment. This is no routine budget standoff. This shutdown is categorically different. It's a different thing in its motive, its method, and its mission. For months, Trump and Vought have been shutting down parts of the government that serve ordinary Americans while keeping open the parts that serve the rich, the connected, and the powerful. The term shutdown itself can be misleading, according to antitrust analyst Matt Stoller. Saying these are government shutdowns teaches Americans that the government isn't necessary, since stuff seems to mostly work. But that's only because the key parts of government aren't shutting down. There's another problem as well. The parts of the government going on furlough tend to do stuff for people without power, whereas the parts that remain operational either facilitate critical functions that keep society operating or are important to the wealthy. Here's what that means in practice, as Stoller documents. Federal workers at the Department of Agriculture responsible for policing those industries, furloughed. Civil servants who manage flood insurance, furloughed. The Federal Reserve, still fully operational. The desk that approves mergers for Wall Street, open for business. Meanwhile, DOJ's antitrust cops have been told to pause prosecuting monopolies like Google while new mergers keep moving on. As Matt Stoller puts it, this shutdown maintains concierge service for Wall Street. Quote, that seems problematic, since whether a merger goes through today or in 2 weeks is not an imminent and significant threat to the safety of human life or the protection of property, unless the concern is a deal banker's bonus. And the tool Russell Vought wields at the Office of Management and Budget is what the New Yorker's Evan Osnos describes as a sort of fiscal partitioning, using the nation's purse to balkanize the country's resources along partisan lines. For example, Vought on Wednesday announced that he's freezing $18 billion for the Hudson Tunnel in New York and canceling $8 billion in climate grants, mostly for states whose citizens tend to elect Democrats, trolling that a tunnel is DEI influenced, as if woke tunnels are a thing. Except that America, it's not actually partitioned. Red, blue, and purple all live together. Those tunnels employ and are used by plenty of Trump voters. As Republican Representative Mike Lawler of New York acknowledged on CNN, quote, listen, I'm a New York Republican, and obviously this project cancellation impacts me. It impacts my district. So it's not just Democrats getting impacted. The thing is, they already know all of this. They just don't care. If that sounds harsh, look at the architect of Project 2025's background. Russell Vought, the man who openly said he wants to inflict trauma on federal workers, those very American workers who've chosen careers in civil service, who have families to support like everyone else does. Vought's project is to break your faith in the very idea that the government should serve the people. Inflicting pain is quite literally the point. Fun fact, Vought is a self-described Christian nationalist who began his career working for Phil Gramm, a Reagan-era Republican who preached that government itself is the problem and profoundly shaped Vought's worldview. Here's a description of Gramm in a 1995 edition of The Atlantic. Quote, he wants to abolish affirmative action, slash taxes, and eliminate roughly a third of the domestic budget, with the biggest cuts coming from programs intended for low-income people. And he is utterly convinced that what he wants, America wants. In sum, Gramm is inviting Republicans to wager the 1996 presidential election on a breathtaking gamble that the voters are at last ready to repudiate liberalism completely, end quote. Sounds awfully familiar. Phil Gramm and his acolyte Russell Vought were Doge before Doge was Doge, minus today's algorithms and turbocharged and proselytizing, that sort of radical fringe thinking. In 2022, Vought wrote that we're in a post-constitutional moment where the old constraints are too quaint and that the president's executive power must be vastly expanded. At his think tank, the Center for Renewing America, there are memos about weaponizing the Justice Department, explicitly discarding post-Watergate norms that presidents do not use the state to punish enemies and to reward friends. Here's the important thing. Vought's philosophy treats Watergate reform as a mistake to be undone. In the intellectual circles that shaped him, the Claremont orbit and its post-constitutional apostles, Watergate wasn't a necessary reckoning. It was, in fact, the original sin that weakened the presidency. In their telling, Nixon was wronged, and the executive was shackled. And the cure is a restoration of an unfettered strongman presidency. That's why Vought writes openly in Project 2025 about a post-constitutional era. The thinking goes, if the old order is already dead, then all the norms that emerged as a result of Watergate, safeguards like the independence at the DOJ, guardrails against political prosecutions, these are not virtues to preserve. They are obstacles to bulldoze. The other crucial thing to know is that between Trump's first and second terms, Vought's think tank drafted a blueprint for shadow offices inside the executive branch, a shadow office of legal counsel, a shadow office of management and budget, vehicles for declaring contentious moves legal first and then daring the process to try to catch up, which could drag on for months or years. In practice, it's rule by fait accompli. As ProPublica reported, Vought made clear in 2024 that the shadow OLC will help Trump steamroll the internal opposition that he faced in his first term. Talk about an actual deep state. He's building one. Understand all this background, and the rest snaps into sharp focus. This second-term project is not just about cutting programs. It's about smashing the very guardrails that could stop them from doing so. On a private call with House Republicans this week, Vought went out of his way to emphasize that the coming layoffs would be consequential, practically salivating at the chance to inflict maximum harm on the ordinary Americans who rely on these jobs. He's also warning that WIC, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children, is nearly out of money and claims there's nothing the administration can do about that unless Democrats surrender. Translation? We can hurt families on purpose, and we will. Meanwhile, the parts of government that serve the wealthy, they keep on humming. Defense contractors, totally fine. Oil and gas, totally fine. Big mergers, step right up. But for everyone else, the scientists whose data is being erased, disaster victims who rely on FEMA, the single mom on WIC, the lights have been flickering for months. Trump's America is not divided between left and right. It's divided between those for whom government still works and for those whom it doesn't. Social safety net for the oligarchy, closed for business. for working and middle-class Americans. The public can see it, at least instinctively. They sense their government is being taken away. They sense that inflicting trauma on American workers is actually the point, which is why majorities across parties, including a majority of MAGA-aligned Republicans, support extending the ACA subsidies that keep health insurance premiums from doubling for 24 million Americans. And while families worried about the rent and their doctors and their groceries, the president took the time to post a meme of Russell Vought as the Grim Reaper, scythe and all. Adolescent provocation as policy. Your tax dollars at work.